Kidden was a hopeless corporate drone with zero love life until he was Isekai'd to meet with God. There, God bestowed him with a secret skill that allows him to upgrade anything his hand touches. So he uses this power spawn a mermaid as his wife, build a farm and live a relaxing simple life that he never had. It all begins when a random group of kids suddenly appear in a castle and wonder what's going on. There, King Genesis explains that they've been at war with the demon nation for years and are on the verge of an extreme crisis. This is why they summon people from other worlds, blessed with power, who happen to be in the group before them. The group stares in confusion while a servant suggests they begin to measure their ability. They start with Dora, the explorer here, and discover she's blessed with the Scythe of the Goddess, a rare skill. The group wonders what they mean by skills, so the servants explain that they receive abilities from the gods when they pass to their world. King Genesis reveals that their people don't have such skills, so they regard their summons as heroes. At this, the summons become excited at the idea of being powerful heroes. The servants tell Momoko that she in particular is blessed with a skill that could obliterate high-class demons with just a swing, so King Genesis is satisfied that his summoning worked out perfectly. That is until one of the servants points out that the NPC of the group, Kidden, has zero skills. The entire palace goes silent as Kidden's system screen confirms that he was just a waste of summoning magic. Before this, Kidden was wasting away as a corporate drone about to board a bus full of sweaty, angry workers like your future self. However, as soon as he stepped forward to join them, he suddenly touched the belly of a round man in robes. Kidden looked around confused, so the fat man informed him he's a god. Kidden figured the smell of a worker's armpit must have taken his life, but the god explained that he was being summoned to another world and his dad picked him specially. Kidden wondered who this dad was, so the god revealed that it was Zeus, king of the man-hoes. The goddess Athena used to be an administrator, but thanks to her discrimination against men, she was given the boot. As Kidden struggles to wrap his head around this, the god introduces himself as Hephaestus and tells him he's good at making things. Hephaestus reaches into his robe, explaining that he gave this skill his best shot since it's his first time giving someone a skill. He then pulls out a glowing orb and names the skill master of supremacy. He warns that it might be a little hard to use, but believes Nori can figure it out. Hephaestus then pushes the orb of light into Kidden and tells him to use the skill consistently. A bright light shines as Kidden receives the skill, and that is the last thing he remembers before arriving at the castle. At this moment, the servants were still worried that one of the heroes was lacking a skill, but Kidden figured he couldn't fight against demons or monsters without skills. Kidden then approaches the king to ask something, but the king immediately informs him he won't be able to return to his previous world. Momoko asks if this means they can't send them back, so Genesis admits that they're not particularly good at giving return tickets. However, he says the Demon King is said to have the knowledge, which is why they need to fight to defeat his armies. Kidden points out that he can't help them with no skills, so Genesis wonders what to do about him. At this, Kidden requests a plot of land, which surprises the king as Kidden doesn't mind somewhere far away where he can live out his days in solitude. His plan is to leave the corporate torture and live out his second life in this new world. Later, a guide shows Kidden to a vast wilderness and tells him all of it is officially his domain. The man assures him that, along with the stipend from the king, Kidden is free to live however he wants. Kidden points out that if he's being given unexplored land, it couldn't possibly be part of Genesis' kingdom. At this, the man assures him it's a good thing he's being thrown in the middle of nowhere cause at least he doesn't have to pay taxes. Kidden agrees that he'll at least live for free till the guide asks him to cough up money for his guide fee. After, the man tells him he's now free to do as he pleases, and whether he lives or dies is up to him. As Kidden watches the man walk off, he feels bad that he needs to be compensated for lacking a skill. However, he decides to focus on the positive and start his new life. If this was the average story, Kidden would be on some great adventure battling dragons and bagging babes. But Kidden would rather stay safe and get to Goon another day. He begins to head deep into the wilderness so he can be far away from their reach. Finally, he arrives at a beach, and when he feels the sea breeze, he decides there's nowhere better than there. He excitedly announces that he's chosen a place to stay and will make his own little kingdom. His first task is to secure some water, but he figures the one beside him is seawater. He decides to taste it, and to his surprise, the water is drinkable. Kidden wonders if the large body of water before him could possibly be a freshwater lake, but then he spots an octopus leg and wonders if they live in shallow water. Regardless, Kidden decides he's eating well tonight and reaches in to grab it, but he slips and falls inside the lake. Moments after, he emerges, gasping for air with the octopus on his head. Kidden laments how salty the water is and decides that it's seawater after all, but he then wonders how it tasted sweet earlier. He decides to see if he's already losing his mind on day one and scoops up some water with his hands. Kidden tastes it, and to his surprise, the water is sweet again. With no other explanation, the idiot thinks it must be a trait of the new world, so he focuses on making food next since water won't be a problem. He tosses the octopus in a pan and figures the salt water will act as his seasoning. Now, Kidden needs to make fire, so he carves a hole into a wooden plank. Next, he inserts a stick in it and has to rotate it by hand. He figures it'll be easier said than done and plans to keep going at it. But on his very first turn, the wood catches fire, shocking him. Kidden finally cooks his octopus and chows down in silence. As a self-aware bum, he wonders how he made a fire so easily and even made a bowl and chopsticks. He then begins to praise his survival skills when the truth finally hits him like a ton of bricks. He remembers his encounter with Hephaestus and the Master of Supremacy skill he was given and wonders if this could be it. He decides to test it out, so he grabs a sickle and swings it at some nearby grass while calling out his power like a Power Ranger's transformation. Immediately, a powerful force cuts through the grass, and Kidden stares in disbelief as he realizes the grass has been cut down to the stem. Still unconvinced, Kidden grabs a plow and tries to test it out too. He places it on the soil with minimum effort, but again, a great force overturns the soil. Kidden sees that it has been plowed thoroughly and exactly as he imagined it without doing anything. He then concludes that the Master of Supremacy skill takes the efficiency of anything he holds and multiplies it. Kidden realizes starting a farm with this power would be a breeze, so he gets right to it. He decides to plant the strange seeds he got back in town, and moments later, the field is all set up. He has no idea what he planted, but figures it would count as food supplies. Since that will likely take a while, he decides to fish something for dinner. Moments later, Kidden waits by the seaside with his fishing rod, satisfied with how his life is turning out. He owes his wonderful skill to Hephaestus and plans to sacrifice some rice balls to him when he grows rice and finds seaweed. Suddenly, he feels a tug on his rod and figures a fat one is about to bust out. However, when he pulls the hook out, a girl emerges on the other end of it. When Kidden sees her, he wonders if Hephaestus learned a thing or two from Zeus, but when he takes a closer look, he sees her tail and realizes she's a mermaid named Plattie. This is no surprise since he's in another world, but Plattie suddenly starts demanding to know why he would fish her out like that. She cries as she informs him that now that he's fished her out, he has to marry her. As Plattie continues to lament about how humiliating this is, Kidden wonders how he already bagged a wife. Plattie says she can never return to the ocean now that she's been dirtied, so Kidden suggests that just because she got caught once doesn't mean she can't go back. However, Plattie interrupts and says the mermen have always looked down on land dwellers, so she can't show her face again after being caught by the most disgusting monsters on the planet humans. She then tells Kidden it is now his responsibility to take care of her. Kidden insists that interspecies relationships can be pretty rough, in bed, and suggests she thinks it through. Plattie then stares at her tail and realizes it would be pretty hard to get railed with it, but Kidden insists he didn't mean it like that. Just then, Plattie pulls out a bottle and says she'll drink. As she downs it in one go, Kidden is amazed by her throat capacity when a bright light suddenly blinds him. When he manages to look, he sees her tail transform into legs. She stands up and shows off her new upper body, but Kidden has to cover her nether region, so you creeps don't goon to it at midnight. Plattie brags about how he can now have Kidden's children and asks Kidden if he has any other complaints, so Kidden tells her it's fine as long as she puts something on. Later, Kidden realizes he hastily took her as a wife when he doesn't have anything other than plowed fields. Plattie complains about the pants he gave her, so he threatens not to marry her if she doesn't keep them on. When he calms down, he says he'll get her something nice later, but for now, they don't even have a roof to sleep under. He laments how he just arrived in the area when they suddenly noticed the seeds sprouting. Kidden realizes this is also part of the skill Hephaestus gave him. Plattie asks what he's growing, but Kidden admits he doesn't know and will find out when they bloom. He figures whatever they are will make him self-sufficient, but the missus doesn't know what he means. He explains that they'll make their own food, house, and tools and live a humble lifestyle. So Plattie laments how troublesome land dwellers are but agrees to follow her husband. Kitten asks if she's sure, so she informs him that her species uses medicinal magic, and she's a master in that regard. Kitten asks what she means, so she gets annoyed and offers to show him if he doesn't get it. She starts taking her pants off, making Kitten freak out. Then she starts running with her cheeks flapping in the wind as Kitten loses his mind. She promises to get some supplies from home and dives back into the water, where she turns into a mermaid again and disappears. When Kitten stares at the water, he wonders what the heck just happened. As Kitten returns to his field, he realizes that since Plattie is really thinking of becoming his wife, there goes his peaceful way of life. However, since there's no guarantee she'll even come back, he decides to start working on building a simple house. A while later, the house is complete, and Kitten can't believe he completed it in 1 hour. When he relaxes inside, he laments how tiring the gift is till he realizes the fatigue is from worrying about Plattie, who he figures is not coming back. The next morning, the Free Cheeks mermaid returns and startles him. She announces that she's home, but Kitten begs her to put some pants on first. As she does this, Kitten asks where she was all night, explaining that he was worried, but Plattie says mermaids don't need land dwellers' worries. She then explains that it took her a while to pack up and shows Kitten her hosets and what's its galore for her medicinal magic. She explains that if you mix plants with medicinal properties with magic, you create medicinal magic, which is very valuable. Kitten asks if he can use it when he catches a cold, so she says she can make one to counteract the symptoms. Kitten agrees that'll be pretty helpful when Plattie runs off and returns with a giant fish. She explains that fish-type monsters have a lot of mana stored in their bodies. She then cuts it up with her bare hands, boils it, extracts it, sets it to dry, and finally powders it. The result is a fertilizer that would make his plants grow even faster. She then suggests they use it right away as Kitten realizes she went through all that trouble for the field. The next day, Kitten is surprised to see all the plants have now grown. Kitten praises how amazing the fertilizer is, though Plattie informs him that she's the amazing one. He then inspects the fruits and grabs a tomato. When he takes a bite out of it, he screams at how delicious it is. The mermaid is surprised to see her new husband making out with a tomato, so she grabs one herself and takes a bite to see what's so great about it. When she takes a moment of silence, Kitten worries that the food doesn't suit her species. But to his surprise, the mermaid falls in love with the tomato and asks if land dwellers usually eat such delicious things. Next, she grabs an onion and a carrot and asks if she can eat them too. But Kitten stops her and advises that some vegetables are better when they're cooked. Plattie begins making a nuisance of herself as she demands to eat some vegetables, so Kitten throws them into a pot to cook. But he warns that this was nothing more than a hodgepodge cooked in seawater. When he's done, he hands her a bowl of food, and she tastes it. He hesitantly asks how it is, so she confirms that it's equally as delicious. As Kitten stares in disbelief, he figures he just might get used to some of her noise after all. The mermaid asks if land dwellers enjoy these types of meals on a regular basis, but Kitten says it should have more meat and fermented herbs. The mermaid does a spit take as she asks if it can really get more delicious than this, so Kitten assures her they'll make condiments, soy sauce, and herbs and get some meat soon. As Kitten continues to daydream about getting kitchen utensils and the rest, the mermaid gets upset with him. Kitten realizes he hasn't asked her name yet, so she introduces herself as Plattie and asks for his. Kitten is about to say his original name when he realizes it's a chance to remake himself and choose a new one. He mumbles the name Kitten to himself, and when he likes the ring of it, he proudly announces his name is Kitten and says he is looking forward to getting to know her. Plattie promises to remember the name, and that's how Kitten officially starts his life with Plattie. Some days later, Kitten wakes up aching from sleeping on the hard floor. When he looks over to the bed, he notices Plattie's gone. He realizes that despite her new legs, she's still a fish, so he wonders if she's found herself a chopping board to lie on. Since he just happened to catch her, he hopes she's not struggling. Suddenly, a scream rips through the air, so Kitten rushes out to ask what's wrong. Plattie says there's someone in the field, so Kitten explains that it's just a scarecrow. Plattie wonders what that is, so Kitten shows off his creation and points out the joints he made that allow movement, along with a wooden sword that helps drive birds away. Plattie asks if the scarecrow is a doll that murders birds, but Kitten says the sword is just a joke and doesn't actually move. By having the doll there, birds will think a human is near and won't come close. Suddenly, the doll starts to move, to Kitten's surprise. It hops over in the direction of some birds and begins waving them off. Kitten says that was not supposed to happen, and there's no reason it should. However, he starts to wonder if it's because he made it with his hands. Plattie asks if there's something wrong with his hands, so Kitten explains that he was actually summoned to their world by the king of the country. As Kitten thinks deeply about his power, Plattie points out that Kitten is a hero. Kitten is surprised that she even knows what that is, so she insists she's not that brain dead. She knows summoning heroes is one of mankind's magic rituals, but she points out that it's usually used to fight the demon kind. When Kitten confirms this, Plattie asks what he's doing here. Kitten says he didn't like the fighting with the demons part and chose to retire there. Plattie says that's interesting since land dwellers only survive if they stick together. She then asks Kitten if he's different from the rest of the land dwellers, but Kitten says he's probably the same race she's referring to. Plattie wonders if this bozo is strong or weak, while Kitten wonders what they should have for breakfast. Then, he suddenly remembers something. He points out that Plattie was up pretty early and asks where she went, but Plattie gets flustered by the question. Plattie says she went to the toilet and yells at him for lacking manners while he tries to apologize. She then asks him where he does his business, so Kitten says he dumps it in the ocean. Plattie gets upset and hurls insults at him, but the idiot wonders what's wrong with it. He even heard sailors did the same, and the planktons fed on them and were eating, thus becoming part of the food chain. Plattie stares him down menacingly as she insists there's no such thing. She points out that it's that insensitive side she hates about land dwellers and explains that ocean dwellers can complete their own food cycles. She tells him not to impose their disgusting ways here, so Kitten kneels down and begs for her forgiveness. Plattie says there's no helping it since land dwellers aren't like them. She then tells him to wait there and rushes off. Kitten wonders what's going on, so he stays put. As he waits, he admits he seems to have forgotten the basics of survival. Though he asked for a desired lifestyle, humans are pretty weak against nature, so he's kind of relieved that Plattie's there with him. However, he's not sure how Plattie feels about it since she's always ranting about how much she hates it. Just then, Plattie returns with a bowl of starfish-shaped monsters and says they're the ocean's cleaners because they absorb organic matter around them. She explains that if he puts them in a box, that can be his toilet. Plattie offers to demonstrate and cuts herself with a knife, allowing the blood to fill up the box. The starfish monsters immediately begin to suck up the blood, and Plattie proudly announces that the effect they have is amazing. Just then, Kitten grabs her hand and panics as he wonders what to do now that there's so much blood. He insists that none of this would have happened if he didn't catch her that day. He almost tears up as he begins a speech that sounds like a eulogy, but Plattie smacks him aside and shows him that her arm is perfectly fine. Kitten is surprised at how amazing mermen are, so Plattie says humans are too easily frightened. Kitten apologizes for being scared, inconsiderate, and dirty. He then explains that the reason he fished her is also because of the skill he received so she can return to the ocean. However, Plattie says she's taken a liking to him and intends to keep assisting him as his bride. When she calls him her dear, Kitten panics, causing Plattie to ask if he has a problem with it. However, Kitten says he doesn't and starts to feel better about the whole situation. He catches Plattie off guard when he thanks her, but Plattie returns to her usual fussy self and demands breakfast. Meanwhile, in a nearby cave by the waters, the stuff of nightmares awaits as it senses a strange manna nearby. The next day, Plattie shows off a skirt she made from the wrapping cloth of her luggage. Kitten apologizes for being useless once again, but Plattie says it's her duty to make herself presentable for her man. She then explains that she's going out for the first time in a while to a dungeon she found. Kitten asks if a dungeon is the place where they find treasure, fight monsters, and face the boss at the bottom, but Plattie doesn't give a straight answer and says it'll be better if he sees it for himself. Later, they arrive at the cave with Kitten wheezing like he swallowed his inhaler. He asks how Plattie found a dungeon 2 hours away, so she says it was while he was working the fields. She then explains that the one before them is a cave dungeon, and dungeons appear where mana is abundant. Kitten says it looks like an ordinary cave to him till a strange feeling surrounds him, and it feels like his face is getting licked by a large animal he can't even see. Plattie explains that the mana in the dungeons becomes dense and eventually gets transformed into monsters. As a result, these monsters will eventually overflow and invade the earth and its oceans. Kitten points out how horrible that sounds, so Plattie explains that it's why they came there. Kitten excitedly asks if they can do something about it, so Plattie says it's next to impossible to cleanse the things inside, but they can come periodically and beat up the monsters. Once she's done, Plattie waltzes toward the cave and tells Kidden he can go back home now, but Kidden calls out and insists that he's still some sort of husband, so he'll go with her. At this, they both step into the dungeon, but are surprised at how different it looks from the entrance since it looks like a castle. Suddenly, Plattie senses something and realizes the monsters are already here. Just then, a group of fugly animal-looking abominations come rushing out and surround them. Plattie tells Kidden to stay back as she pulls out 3 vials of potions and tosses them at the monsters. When the vials make contact, Kidden is surprised to see the monsters burning, but Plattie points out that it's not just that. Some were freezing, getting struck by lightning, and even melting. Plattie then brags that merfolk can also make battle medicine, while Kidden begins to feel more and more like a house ornament. Plattie then tells Kidden to charge forward with her, but the man's not sure who the real monster is anymore. He plans to let his missus do all the work since he's useless without a tool that isn't in his trousers. Just then, Kidden looks to his side and notices a sword conveniently lying around. He excitedly grabs it, but when he sees Plattie obliterating everything in sight, he figures he might never get a chance to use it. After a while, Kidden asks if they can go home since she's beaten quite a few monsters. When she refuses, Kidden asks if this is still not enough, but Plattie explains that something's weird about this dungeon. She points out the layout of the dungeon as well as a feeling that the monsters are being led by something. She figures that there's one master somewhere. Kidden figures she's referring to the boss, so she tells him dungeons with a master are extremely rare and extremely dangerous. She then explains that only 2 species are capable of becoming dungeon masters. One is a dragon, while the other, suddenly, a strange energy begins to surround them, making Kidden wonder what on earth it is. Plattie says it's ghostly air, which means there's no mistaking that there's a dungeon master after all, and it's the worst of the 2. Kidden asks if it's the dragon one, but Plattie says it's the other one, the king of the undead. As the creepy entity stares down at them, Kidden asks what it is, so Plattie says it's a powerful magician who decided to turn himself into the undead during its past life. To encounter him is to encounter death. At that moment, the undead king recognizes the mana he felt earlier and determines to turn him into a corpse and welcome him as his companion. Plattie doesn't flinch as she hurls a potion right at his head. The potion makes contact and begins to burn, but the effect starts to reverse itself. Kidden realizes the undead king can heal himself, and Plattie agrees that that would be an immortal for you. She tells Kidden she still has potions and suggests he leave her and run. However, Kidden says he could never do such a thing. Instead, he rushes forward with his sword and reminds her that he is her husband. Plattie watches in stunned silence as Kidden launches at the undead king and is about to strike him with his sword. However, the wimp king surrenders before Kidden even gets the chance. Kidden asks why, so Mr. Bones explains that even without the holy sword, Kidden's power is too frightening. Kidden is shocked to discover the sword he found is a holy sword, so Ghost Rider there points out that it looks like the one he owned. Kidden tries to return it, but Skeletor explains that holy swords have wills of their own to choose their masters, which means this one just ditched his bony behind and chose fresh meat. Now that the pile of bones has lost his Excalibur, he says his duty in this world is over and asks Kidden to strike him down with the sword because even his undead body can be laid to rest with the light of his holy sword. Just then, Kidden says he doesn't think he's the owner of the sword. When the dead king asks how, Kidden explains that when he was summoned to this world, he was given a power that makes him the master of anything he holds, which is probably what the sword responded to. Suddenly, Scully freaks out and asks how this could be. He says such power belongs to a god of legends and would surely be immeasurable within the calculations of a skill. Scully insists that since Kidden has received a gift from the gods, he can't even be called a hero and is instead a saint. He then prostrates on the floor and begs Kidden to allow him to show some hospitality. Kidden asks not to be leveled up like that while Plattie brags about the husband she laid her eyes on. Scully asks what someone like him is doing there, so Kidden says he recently settled in the area. Plattie adds that monster fur and bones make for great magic tools and materials, and some burnt up ones are delicious. Upon hearing this, Kidden realizes the dungeons are basically convenience stores, so Plattie says it is pretty convenient to be so close to one. Plattie asks Scully if it's okay to go wild in the dungeon from time to time, so he tells her she was a big help since he was planning to clean them out himself. Plattie gets excited as she refers to him as their neighbor, while Kidden wonders what in the hell is going on here. Plattie tells Scully her and Kidden's names and asks for his in return. However, Scully has a hard time remembering. He remembers serving as the archbishop in his previous life, and for some reason, he ended up being pursued and was on the run. That's when he stumbled on this dungeon and used its mana to become an undead. But he can't remember the reason why nor his name. Kitten and Plattie were sad to hear his miserable tale, so Scully concluded that he probably just lacked a reason to live. However, Scully believes that his boredom will reduce now that he's got neighbors. Kitten smiles nicely and suggests Master Scully come to visit them and taste some of the nice vegetables they're growing. Plattie asks what's with the master tag, so Kitten says since he was a high-ranking member of the church, he thinks it's fitting. Master Scully thanks them, and this is how they got themselves a nice neighbor and a holy sword. Some days later, Kitten announces that his latest creation is finished. Plattie asks what he made this time, so Kitten says it's a smithing kiln. He also praises the holy sword for being able to cut a boulder like it's butter, while Plattie worries he's using it wrong. She then asks why he would make a smithing kiln, so Kitten reminds her of the gift he received from Master Scully. Plattie remembers he received a mana medal, which was so kind of the fleshless wonder as dungeons barely generate enough mana to make one mana medal, and yet he gave it away. Plattie asks what he plans to do with the medal, so Kitten says he can finally make what he's been meaning to. Plattie figures Kitten must be planning to make a mana sword which could easily fetch them 10 gold coins. But Kitten presents a frying pan and knife and reveals that what he's always wanted are kitchen utensils. When Plattie stares at him cluelessly, Kitten offers to demonstrate for her. He cuts the vegetables with the kitchen knife and fries them in the pan. He does a little salt bee impression while adding some seasoning, and voila, a new dish is complete fried vegetables. Plattie cries for joy as she eats the delicious meal, and as she stares down at her bowl, she asks if they always had such utensils, but Kitten says he made those too. As Kitten begins to brag about how amazing the mana medal is for cooking, Plattie snaps back to her senses and worries about the use of his mana medal. However, when Kitten says his cooking collection just expanded a bit, Plattie is struck by a realization. She asks if he really has more dishes to add to his collection, so Kitten confirms this and says he needs a few more ingredients. When Plattie asks what they are, Kitten says he really wants some meat. He then begins to explain how the meat would complement the vegetables and some oil to create something rich, causing Plattie to salivate and insist they're going out immediately. Later, they stroll through the forest, and Plattie admits that she hasn't seen a mountain Thai monster because she's a mermaid. Kitten wonders why they don't do some simple hunting, so Plattie explains that mountain-type monsters were more suited for cooking than bird-type monsters. As she continues to yap, Kitten can't help but notice the monsters in this world are really used for various benefits. Kitten points out that at the cave dungeon, monsters are born, but Master Scully prevents them from leaving the cave. So he asks that if there are mountain monsters on the mountain, does that mean the whole mountain is a dungeon? Suddenly, Plattie stops while Kitten continues to lament why they can't hunt regular animals. A group of eyes begins to approach from the distance, and when they get closer, they turn out to be giant hog-like monsters. Plattie is excited that they came, while Kitten can sense his life is in danger yet again. Plattie points out that they're square boars and is excited that there are 2 dungeons near them, while Kitten wonders what there is to rejoice about. Plattie suggests they beat every single one of them down, but tells Kitten to restrain them as cleanly as possible. His life flashes before his eyes as the horde of boars charges toward him, but since he has no choice, he swings his sword toward the boars, who happen to charge one by one. However, he manages to take down every single boar while Plattie sings his praises. Kitten thinks this was unexpected, but Plattie's just excited to chow down on some meat. Plattie tells Kitten to cut them up so she can freeze them with her herbs, but Kitten says they'll need a fridge and wagon. Later that day, Kitten finishes with the freezer and wagon and asks if the freezing magic will work inside. When she confirms this, Kitten feels relieved to have Plattie improve their daily lives. Plattie then tells Kitten to get to work on upgrading their meals. Kitten begins brainstorming and confirms that boar meat is still pork. He then figures the best meal to make with pork is tonkatsu. As Kitten begins imagining the meat in his mouth, the liquid begins to run down his chin, making Plattie jealous. However, Kitten says they're still short on another ingredient, which is eggs. Kitten asks if it's a custom in this world to cook bird eggs, so Plattie says they don't, but they know land dwellers would do that kind of thing. She then points at a bird invading their field and says it wouldn't be suitable for cooking. She suggests they go to the mountain again and search for a bird-type monster. Kitten is frustrated that they have to go again and plans to unalive any monster they come across. Suddenly, Kitten senses a strange presence, and when he and Plattie turn round to see what it is, the fools first wonder if it's a bird or a plane, but they eventually realize it's a dragon. The dragon asks if they are the scum who invaded the dungeon that he rules. Kitten soils his pants while Plattie confirms if he's referring to the mountain over there. When she does, she asks if the dragon is the master of the dungeon, and he claims he is. Kitten reminds Plattie that she said the dungeon had no master, so Plattie says the dragon seems attracted by his strength. The dragon introduces himself as Vale and demands to know who entered his dungeon without permission and slaughtered his underlings. Kitten swears they didn't know the dungeon had a master and promises never to go back there if Vale can forgive them. However, Vale insists that smaller life forms trespassing in his domain have tarnished his honor, so he'll wipe them from existence and cleanse their sins with a fire blast hotter than your imaginary girlfriend. As the flames of death approach them, Plattie screams out, expecting to die. However, with a determined look on his face, Kitten grabs his sword and uses all his might to swing it, slashing through the flames. When the flames dispel, the dragon freaks out. Kitten can't believe that he did it, so Plattie praises him, saying it's expected of her husband. Vale wonders how Kitten blocked it, and not even a single fruit in Kitten's garden got burned. When Kitten turns to face Vale, he suddenly flinches with fear. Kitten apologizes for entering his dungeon without permission, but he says in order to protect the things he cares about, he'll have to fight him. He asks Vale if he's really willing to fight to the death with him, hoping this is enough to make the overgrown lizard back off. When Vale looks closer, he spots Kitten's holy sword, so he asks if that's what he thinks it is. Kitten thinks he can wrap things up quicker with this, so he announces that the undead king bestowed him with such an amazing sword to prove that he's powerful. However, Vale descends and tells Kitten that the sword is actually his. As the dragon swings for Kitten, he watches hopelessly till Master Scully comes out of nowhere to protect Kitten. Vale is surprised to see Scully, who uses a powerful repel magic to push Vale back. Master Scully then turns to Kitten and apologizes for letting things come to this, as it's actually his fault. Plattie demands an explanation, so Scully says that Vale initially turned up at his dungeon looking for the ones who entered his territory. Scully suggested he might be referring to his neighbor, but before he could say anything more, Vale flew off to roast Kitten. Kitten says it was actually his fault for going into Vale's territory without permission, so Scully says he understands since he was human. For humans, dungeons are a very important place to earn everyday necessities, which is why they form parties to challenge the dungeons. For the master of the dungeon, having invaders is just another Tuesday, which is why Scully glares at Vale and scolds him for getting upset at such an insignificant thing. The poor gecko gets scolded for being childish and not living up to his father's title. Lastly, he informs the insect that Kitten isn't even on his level, so he orders him to return to his mountain at once. Vale refuses to leave, demanding to know why a human has the sword his father asked him to retrieve from the talking corpse. When Vale assumes Scully gave it out, Scully explains that the sword has a will of its own and chooses Kitten as its master. Scully then adds that just before he snuffed the life out of Vale's daddy, he at least recognized his power by giving him the sword, unlike Vale, whose single brain cell is basically a lighter switch. Vale refuses to listen and demands to battle Kitten and bets the title of the successor of the dungeon. Scully offers to be his opponent since he wants to fight so badly, so Vale chooses to back off but tells Kitten to remember this day. Before he leaves, Kitten calls out for him to wait and grabs his tail, which immediately causes the lizard to faceplant. Kitten apologizes while Vale wonders how a mere human would dare touch his tail. Kitten asks if he'd like to join them for a meal if he's not in a hurry, so Vale stares in confusion as Kitten hands him a plate of food, explaining that he cooked up some of the square boar from the dungeon. Vale throws the steak in his mouth, and when he swallows, his eyes widen from the realization. He screams at how delicious it is and releases a powerful beam into the sky. He begins to demand more, and Plattie reminds him not to forget her too, so Kitten wonders how many he should make. Suddenly, a bright light begins to shine, and when Kitten turns to look, he sees Vale shrinking. Kitten and Plattie scream in surprise as they realize Vale was a girl this whole time. Vale says she's really come to love his steak and declares her love for Kitten. She then takes her place at the table to wait for more while Plattie chews her out for trying to steal her spot. Scully also takes a bite of the meat and deems it delicious, which surprises Kitten that he can taste. Scully says aside from the excellent grilling, the most amazing thing is the seasoning. Kitten says he just used garlic, salt, and pepper for a simple dish. But Scully reveals that not even the royal palace can make such a delicious dish. At the same time, Plattie and Vale are both in the third trimesters of their food pregnancies. But Vale tells Kidden not to get carried away as she hasn't given up on her sword. Scully tells her to can it since she's still a novice, while Kidden apologizes that the sword won't let go of him. Vale plans to burn Kidden to ashes when he's not looking so she can take the sword away, so Plattie informs her that she won't be able to eat more steaks if she does that. Frustrated, Vale turns back into a dragon and promises Kidden she will surely take the sword from him someday, but till then, she'll stop by to eat his meat. Kidden tells her she's welcome anytime, but before she flies away, Plattie flags her down and asks if there are any bird monsters in her mountain dungeon. Vale says the bird monsters don't taste very good, so Plattie explains that they only need their eggs so they can make the meat dish even tastier than today's own. When Vale hears this, she says she's going to the dungeon right away to check. Plattie asks to go along with her since she knows all about monster ecology, so Vale agrees, and the two gluttons ride off into the sunset together. Kidden stares at his lunatic wife, while Scully comments about how lively the girls are. Kidden agrees and says it's better than being bored to death, but no offense to Scully. Some days later, Kidden announces that he's finished his latest creation. When Plattie asks if it's what she thinks it is, he confirms that he made a sword out of the mana metal. Plattie gets excited as she states that it'll be the world's strongest sword after the holy sword and asks if he's going to sell it. Kidden calls her silly and reveals that it's actually the Scarecrow, Kakashi's upgrade. Plattie's excitement dies when she realizes it's for the doll till she assumes it must be for Kakashi to chop down the pesky birds targeting their fields. Kakashi even responds when she tells it to use its sword slash, so he starts slashing at the birds far up in the sky while Kidden warns him that murder is prohibited. Kidden is relieved he can't reach them, so Plattie asks what he gave the Scarecrow a sword for. At this, Kidden reveals that his sole reason is because it's awesome. Kidden continues to fangirl over what equipment to give Kakashi next, while Plattie says she'll never understand men and their toys. Later, Kidden goes fishing after a long time. He remembers how the last time he was there, he caught Free Cheek's wifey. Even though his intention was to live a slow life, he was busy dealing with his crazy wife, talking corpse neighbor, and overgrown fire gecko. The only way to escape the madness was to go fishing. But just then, another man popped his head up, scaring the shark right out of Kidden. However, when he noticed his fins, Kidden asked if he was friends with Plattie, but the merman immediately commanded his army to unalive Kidden and anyone who opposes them. When the merfolk rush toward Kidden, he grabs his trusty sword and swings it toward them, causing a whirlpool that sucks all the mermen and incapacitates them. Just then, Plattie comes running up, asking what the commotion is about. Before Kidden can explain, the merman calls out to her, and Plattie calls him her brother. Kidden is shocked to hear this, but when the rest of the merfolk call Plattie the princess, Kidden asks what's going on. She introduces the fish with the temper as her older brother, Prince Arowana, next in line to the throne. Next, she turns to Arowana and introduces Kidden as her husband, shocking all the merfolk. She then insists that despite them coming to get her, she'll never return to the Mermaid Kingdom. At that exact moment, Arowana realizes where Kidden keeps his tool every night. He then accuses Kidden of kidnapping and defiling his sister, so he tells his men to resume the battle. All the sardines hop out of the water to attack, so Plattie tells Kidden not to hesitate to counterattack, but Kidden can't bring himself to hurt her family. Just then, a powerful wind sends the merman hurling back into the water. After which, Vale shows up and asks what the commotion is. Arowana's men scream like little girls when they see the dragon as they start to retreat. They tell Arowana to come too before they get boiled for dinner. But Arowana stares in disbelief as the dragon lands beside Kidden and asks if he's okay. Kidden thanks her, so Vale reminds him that she can't eat his delicious meat if he disappears. But Plattie tells her not to get too excited just because he thanked her. Arowana wonders what the hell is going on here, so Vale is surprised to see one merman left swimming. When she points this out, Arowana can't believe his men abandoned him without a second thought, while Vale tells him his reward will be to turn to charcoal. However, Kidden punches Vale's leg and tells her not to hurt him. He points out that the hothead is Plattie's brother, and then he asks Arowana if he'd like to join the girls to eat his meat. Arowana is confused by this offer, so Kidden suggests they talk things through since they don't know each other well. Arowana immediately thinks Kidden must be scheming something and refuses to listen to anything he says. Plattie agrees that there's nothing left to talk about and demands he return to the Mermaid Kingdom, but Kitten scolds Plattie for saying that since her brother did come all this way for her. He then explains that it's his responsibility to listen to what Arowana has to say. When Arowana hears this, he changes his mind. Suddenly, a bright light shines, and he walks out of the water with zero clothes on, determined not to run away from his challenger. Kitten screams for him to hide his package, so Kitten pulls out a Speedo and gets hit with a wave of deja vu. Now that Arowana's got his junk in the trunk, Kitten leads the way. At this, Vale asks Plattie if this might be a chance to try a new dish, but Plattie just stares in silence, causing Vale to ask what's wrong. Moments later, Arowana spots the shoebox they call a house and chews out Kitten for letting a member of the royal family live in such conditions. He starts to cuss Kitten out, accusing him of using Plattie as a slave, so Plattie tells Arowana to shut up and try looking at the other side. Just then, Arowana notices a larger building and asks what kind it is. Kitten explains that it's a storehouse where they keep meat from the mountains and vegetables from the fields. Arowana is struck by the smoothness of the wall, so Kitten calls it plaster and says he used lime from the mountains. Plattie then shows Arowana that there's another house, which is the brewery where they make seasonings. Arowana wonders what those are, so Kitten drools over the thought of fresh miso and soy sauce. Plattie brags that her husband holds knowledge they don't, can cook and fight. She says the storehouse serves as her magic compounding room too, and Kitten always treats her right. Kitten quickly offers Arowana a seat while he serves his new dish. When Arowana notices the kid, he asks who she is, so they break the news that it's Vale's human form. When Arowana fears he might be the meal she's waiting for, Plattie assures him she's just cranky when she asks for food. Moments later, Kitten serves up some beans, leaving Plattie underwhelmed as she asks what it is. He then explains that for some reason, when he grew soybeans, azuki beans also grew somehow. Arowana has never seen food like this before, but just like the girl's reactions, he stops dead in his tracks when he tastes some. Then they all chorus how delicious the food is yet again. Arowana and Plattie shower the food with praise while Vale demands for seconds, only to be told there's none left. When the girls demand to know why, Kitten reminds them that they grew accidentally, so he only had little to use. Immediately, the girls turn and glare at Arowana, who shortened their food ration, and all hell breaks loose. Later, Arowana apologizes to Kitten, admitting that his abilities are far above anyone in their world, and he's more like a saint. Kitten tries to stay humble, but Arowana sees why his sister fell in love with him. He asks to leave Plattie with him for many years to come, but Kitten doesn't seem happy to hear this and asks if he's really okay with that. Plattie wonders why Kitten would possibly say that, so he explains that he's just finding out she's a princess and points out that she shouldn't choose a partner lightly. When he adds other people's expectations are involved, Plattie screams out that they aren't. She insists that she owns her life and chooses to be with him, telling him not to be a fool. Arowana quickly holds back his unhinged sister and tells Kitten he isn't aware of his sister's situation. He explains that with respect to marriage, Plattie faces a problem she cannot avoid. Vale interrupts and figures out what they're talking about. There's a conflict of sovereignty on the surface between the humans and the demons, and now the mermaids are being forced to enter political marriages. Arowana wonders how Vale could possibly know, so she asks who he thinks she is that it wouldn't get to her. While they bicker, Kitten finally understands what's going on. He was summoned to fight against the demons who are at war with the humans. Now, engagements are coming from both humans and demons, and the mermaids will be forced to choose. And if they don't, they'll become enemies of both sides and will be attacked. Because of this, the highest echelons of the kingdom are deciding who Plattie should marry. Arowana figures Plattie must have thought running away was the only way to save her country, so as her older brother, he hopes to fulfill her wishes. Arowana tells Plattie he's glad she met a nice person, and Plattie is touched by this. At this, Arowana lowers himself to the ground and begs Kitten to protect Plattie and marry her officially. Kitten blushes and agrees to make it official if it's alright. However, Vale demands to know if he's really getting married. When Kitten confirms this, Vale says she's going to marry too, sending Kitten and Plattie into a state of shock. She explains that when she was thinking of how to get the holy sword, she realized the properties would be shared if he got married. Plus, the lifespan of humans is like the blink of an eye for a dragon, and she'll get to eat all the delicious food she wants. Vale then asks if she'll marry him, but Kitten says it'll be a hard pass. Vale is in disbelief at his reply, and when she asks why, He reminds her that he already has Plattie. Vale assures Kitten that he's a strong male and will be able to handle multiple wives, but Kitten says he's not into polygamy, at least officially. At this, Vale begins to ugly cry, demanding to know if it's because she's not as strong as the undead king. When Vale keeps pestering the poor guy, he agrees to do it just to shut her up. As Vale rejoices over her victory, he apologizes to Arowana, but Arowana assures him this is a more common issue than he thinks. Meanwhile, Plattie turns red with anger over having an outside woman interfere. That evening, Arowana returns to the Mermaid Kingdom, and Plattie tells Kitten that her brother will inform her parents. She points out that if they get their approval, they'll officially be married, so Kitten turns red as he agrees. Plattie asks him if it's really okay for him, so Kitten wonders what she means. She admits to running away from home when the kingdom's burden became unbearable, which is when she met Kitten. Even though she was forced to marry him because she was caught on his hook, she began to have fun and decided she wanted to stay with him forever. Kitten assures her he doesn't intend to change how their lives are right now. He reminds her that his skill was deemed useless for battle, so he came there, and now they can aim for a happy life. He then asks her to stay by his side from that day forward, making Plattie the happiest fish in the world. She jumps on him to celebrate, and as they hug it out, Vale shows up and demands to know how long she has to wait before she gets some food. This gives Kitten an idea, so he promises to treat Plattie as a wedding gift, while Vale acts like a rusty third wheel with brake problems. Some days later, Kitten decides they need more help. Plattie misunderstands him and tries to hand him a starfish monster, but Kitten clears up the confusion and says he meant workers. He explains that he wants to do something about the field, harvest crops, and make seasonings. He also says that as a husband, he wants to build a home, which touches Plattie and Scully, who isn't supposed to be there. Kitten and Plattie jump when they see him, so Kitten asks if something's wrong. Scully says there isn't, but he came to hang out since he was free. Kitten feels relieved while Scully hands him yet another Mana metal souvenir. He gets excited over the many house tools he can make with it and says it's perfect for him since he's short-staffed. He remembers how Arowana rudely pointed out that the shoebox they live in is a bit of a disgrace, so now he intends to build something different from anything he's ever done. Just then, Plattie has an idea and suggests asking Master Scully for help, but Kitten says it would be unthinkable to do so. Scully asks how many people they'd need and if he should bring them over, but before Kitten can answer, he decides on getting 10 people and disappears, leaving Kitten to wonder where on earth he plans to get them from. Later, Scully returns with his dungeon's humanoid monsters, namely 5 orcs and 5 goblins. He explains that they all take orders from him, and he's ordered them to obey Kitten so they can use them however they want. Kitten nervously introduces himself, but the monsters just stare at him blankly, causing Scully to explain that they don't have the ability to talk. Kitten realizes they have enough intelligence to carry out orders, but are lacking their own survival instincts. Scully also adds that they don't need rewards, and they absorb mana from the air, so they don't need to eat. Upon hearing this, Plattie is excited that every problem has been solved. However, Kitten doesn't seem very comfortable, even though he thanks Scully for all his help. Scully wishes them good luck on making their house and disappears, leaving Kitten pumped to get to work till he remembers the dead souls he has as helpers. He cries at how empty they are, but in no time, they're able to carry out the work. Kitten carefully guides them and shows them just how he wants it, and when the house starts coming together, he praises them for being amazing. The orcs' physiques are really suited for labor, while the goblins are really skillful with their hands, thanks to their small stature. Even though they make mistakes on smaller jobs, they learn little by little and get better. Kitten admits that watching them steadily even made him nicer to them, but when Plattie hears this, she tells him not to empathize with them since they're made of mana and can barely be called living things. Kitten agrees with her, but feels like everyone should be given the chance to live like them. Plattie explains that magical beings have used humanoid monsters in battles against humans with the assumption that they'll be wiped out. However, Kitten points out that from meals to toilet disposal, all those things were thanks to the monster's help. But he resigns when he realizes this is just that kind of world. Just then, one of the goblins trips and falls, so Kitten rushes to ask if he's alright. He helps the goblin up and asks if he's hurt anywhere, but when he stays silent, Kitten laments how much he wants to talk to them. Just then, the goblin slowly mumbles that he's alright, causing Kitten and Plattie to almost have heart attacks. Kitten asks it once again if it's alright, and the goblin says he is. He then tells Kitten that he wants to work more, and suddenly, another goblin joins him and says he wants to work too. Soon, all the goblins and orcs gather around, saying they want to work, so Plattie points out that they all seem to have self-awareness now. Suddenly, Kitten realizes he's been touching them all day, so it's probably a result of his skill, which he should be more careful with. But now that he knows how, he is determined to make them talk with everything he's got and starts hugging the goblins to show his appreciation. The monsters rejoice with Kitten as they grow smarter, while Plattie laments that they can no longer use and dump them. That evening, Kitten finally declares their home complete, while Vale returns and asks what it is. She demands to know what happened while she was away, so Plattie tells her this is her and Kitten's love nest. Vale immediately speeds off to explore and is astonished since she's never seen such a structure before. Kitten calls after her and tells her to take off her shoes so she doesn't damage the tatami. After Vale begins to roll on the floor, Plattie gets the sense she's not going anywhere, but Kitten tells her that's why he built a large house. Plattie freaks out and asks if he means the same for the monsters, so Kitten admits that was the plan, causing the monsters to cry out, saying they don't deserve such nice things. They remind him that their home is in the dungeon, and this might trouble Master Scully, so Kitten suggests that next time, they make a tent house nearby so the monsters can stay. He adds that there are more things he intends to make, like a bathroom and kitchen, and asks if they can help with those. Again, the monsters all surround him and praise him for his kindness while Vale rolls on the floor, and Plattie wonders what's happened to their love nest. Just then, a goblin runs up, and Kitten addresses him as Gobikichi. When Plattie wonders what that's about, Kidon explains that Gobikichi is the most skilled at sewing. Gobikichi tells Kitten that his request is ready, so they head into the room to find a futon. Kitten then tells Plattie it's his present to her. He tells her to try lying in it, so Plattie slides in, hoping she's doing it right. Once she's in the correct position, she goes speechless about how good it feels. Kitten apologizes for making her sleep on plywood till then, so Plattie gets googly-eyed and thanks him. She then turns to Gobikichi and thanks him too. Meanwhile, in the distance, a ship sails for their shores. Later, Gobikichi is fetching some water when he spots the ship sailing toward him and wonders what it is. Inside the house, a glass of water is handed to Arowana, but when he stares silently, Kitten asks what's wrong. Arowana says God must have blessed Kitten with a special power to build such an astonishing house in such a short time, so Kitten laughs it off, even though he's totally right. The men sit down, and Arowana admits that his visit is about Kitten and Plattie's marriage, which he's informed his father about. When Kitten asks for the result, Arowana says his father was confused at first, but when Arowana vouched for his personality and strength, their father agreed to it. He then points out that it's even better that Kitten doesn't belong to any of the races, so Kitten nervously says he's glad about the news. He asks about the political proposals from the demons and humans, so Arowana says they're angry. However, Plattie's father proclaimed that his daughter would marry the holy saint, and that seemed to do the trick. There was resentment from the competing races, but since they knew their enemies wanted the same thing, they decided to let it be. Once that's settled, Arowana returns to the ground and assures him they won't cause him any trouble, so he should take care of Plattie. Kitten tells him to stop with the formalities, explaining that he enjoys being with Plattie. He says that he arrived in the wilderness alone, and if it wasn't for Plattie, he might still be alone and would eventually forget his name, no offense to Scully. When Arowana asks who that is, Kitten explains it's their neighbor, who also happens to be the undead king. Just then, a goblin comes racing into the room with bad news that an enemy with a large group of magical beings is coming from the coast. Kitten and Arowana wonder how the magical beings found this location, so Arowana says it's impossible since this is their country's top secret. Once outside, Kitten spots the ship, and Arowana confirms that it's the ship of magical beings. When they reach the banks, Kitten asks Orcubo the orc if he's okay when he notices a heavyweight woman kneeling on the ground. Orcubo calls her a stress of mu, and when Kitten looks at her unusually large milkers, he understands why. The woman corrects them and says she's a stress of deception, and member of the 4 heavenly kings. Orcubo says she came to unalive Kitten, so they simply captured her. Kitten is shocked by this and asks what the pile of bones is, so they say she came with 100 skeleton soldiers, but they manage to exterminate all of them. Kitten then huddles around the monsters and warns them not to do anything dangerous as he might cry if he ever loses any of them. Meanwhile, Arowana asks Estrez why she knows this place, so she immediately recognizes him as the prince of the Mermaid Kingdom and tells them they became stupid because of peace and underestimated their intel gathering network. As she talks, she secretly frees herself from her restraints. She then announces that her task is to bring back the mermaid princess and defeat the bride thief, the holy saint. She points her sword toward Kidden and figures he must be the saint. Arowana warns her that Estrez is particularly dangerous and bloodthirsty and offers to deal with her. But Kidden stops him just as Scully shows up and asks why it's so noisy. Arowana can't believe his eyes as Kidden introduces him as the master he was telling him about. Estrez freaks out while Arowana warns Kidden that the Undead King is one of the world's 2 calamity classes. Scully asks what he heard about someone threatening to defeat the saint. So Estrez wonders what in the world this situation when she suddenly hears a sound from above and looks up to find Vale demanding to know what all the ruckus is about. Estrez almost swallows her tongue when she sees Kidden casually welcoming the dragon home, while Plattie runs up to make sure Kidden is okay. Arowana asks where Plattie has been, so Vale says they were searching for eggs and tonkatsu in the mountains when they spotted the demon ship and came over. Vale warns Estrez that hurting her master is making an enemy of her, so she threatens to burn their place to the ground till Kidden calls her out, causing her to apologize. Afterward, Kidden walks over to Estrez, who should have worn adult diapers today, and makes her a suggestion. He tells her that if she promises not to be hostile to them, he'll let them go home. However, Estrez insists she's being insulted as she's one of the 4 heavenly kings, but she can barely get the words out. She forces herself to get it together and challenges Kidden to a duel, suggesting that if he wins, she'll listen to what he has to say. Vale gets upset and plans to incinerate her, but Kidden tells her to wait. He decides that he'll protect his lifestyle himself and pulls out his sword to accept Estrez's duel. Estrez is happy to hear this as, despite Kidden's strong allies, she assumes he's just a lowly human till she finally notices it. She sees the legendary holy sword, drops her sword, and faints on the spot. As they crowd around the low blood sugar demon, Vale suggests they bury her so she becomes fertilizer for their field, but Kidden tells her no. Moments later, Kidden begs Vale to deliver Estrez to her home since the sailors ran for the hills upon seeing a dragon. On the way, Estrez asks Vale why she's serving Kidden, so Vale tries to keep it secret but ends up blabbing about how delicious his dishes are. After hearing this, Estrez wonders who in the world Kidden is. Some days later, Kidden and the girls are shocked to see Estrez back with 2 more demon girls, Belemi and Belina. Plattie tells the demons to go away, but Kidden calms her down so they can hear what the matter is. The girls ask for help as they've been expelled from the Demon King's army. However, Estrez says she was the only one who was chased out and begs the girls to go back. The girls remind her of their vow to serve her forever, while everyone else wonders what happened. Vale transforms and threatens to burn the girls for being noisy, so Kidden calms her down with the promise of his juicy meat again. Vale transforms back while the girls cower in fear, so Kidden asks why she was fired from the demon army. Estrez explains that she failed the task she was given, got all her soldiers annihilated, and brought a dragon to the battlefield, which caused mayhem. When Kidden hears that last part, he wonders what Vale did, but she feigns ignorance. After this, Estrez was stripped of her title as one of the 4 heavenly kings and exiled. Belemi insists that the court-martial was being shady since he decided quickly before the Demon King arrived. Belina also agrees and blames another demon named Ravian for being behind all the scheming. Estrez corrects them both and says strength is everything in the demon army, and since she couldn't fulfill her task, she's in the wrong. As the 3 girls cry over their predicament, Kidden wonders what he's witnessing yet again. Plattie asks if they're expecting her to take responsibility, so Estrez says she isn't, but she needs to know something before she can start a new life. On this island, she first encountered goblins and orcs whose power surpassed her own and could even speak. On top of that, the Undead King and the Dragon, 2 world-class calamities, both follow Kidden. She insists on finding out the reason and begs for a chance to work under Kidden. Kidden casually agrees, shocking Plattie and Vale, who were barely managing a 3-way already. Kidden says he'd like to help her since she's putting herself out there. But when Vale warns that the demons might come to harm him if he helps, Kidden says he'll confront them if it happens. Baitme and Belemi ask if they can also stay, so Kidden gladly tells them no amount of melons is too much. However, his condition is that bloodshed is prohibited while they're around. Plattie figures her hubby's too nice, while Vale calls him naive, but Estrez says she understands and is willing to do anything, even if it's a little freaky. Kitten says he just might want something now, so Plattie and Belina push Estrez away to volunteer. But none of them could have guessed the tool they would end up holding was to farm the field. Kitten was initially going to give them household chores, but he figured that might be the third calamity class waiting to happen. Meanwhile, Estrez brags that her skills are suitable for the work till Plattie points out that she's just hitting the same spot. She explains that a hoe is used to make ridges to plant seeds, so Kitten is surprised by how well informed she is. Plattie explains that she was born a commoner while Belina and Estrez were born as aristocrats, so she tells the girls to leave it to her. However, Estrez insists that she also swore to serve the holy saint, making Kitten pleased by how earnest even demons are. Kitten tells Plattie to make ridges with the other goblins while Estrez and Belina plant the seeds with a 30-centimeter gap. Time passes, and the girls are hard at their tasks till Estrez tries to stand up and realizes her back is killing her. As she laments, Belina suddenly screams out, causing Estrez to ask what's wrong. In response, Belina says something beneath the earth is wriggling around. Estrez's back cracks again and makes her scream from the pain just as Belina cries from disgust, causing Kitten to reconsider their task. Later, Estrez is sent hunting with the orcs, so she figures it's the right task for a warrior like her. She asks Plattie what they're hunting, and when Plattie says they're square boars, Estrez promises to redeem herself from the shame of the field. Suddenly, they hear a rumbling noise and figure the boars are coming. The boars emerge, so Estrez tells her girls they can take them. But before they can lift a finger, the orcs and goblins begin ripping through the horde effortlessly. When they take a closer look, they realize the goblins and orcs are using tools made from monometals. Plattie brags that all their tools are made from monometals, and Estrez is astonished by how rare the purity of the metal is. Belina figures that must be why the monsters are so strong, but Estrez reveals that they were unparalleled when she met them, and they didn't have weapons at the time. Plattie then informs her that their hoes were also made of monometals, so Estrez begins to wonder if it's their abilities that are lacking after all. She grows annoyed and insists they will also take some of the boars down, but by this time, there's no boar left to take on. Estrez had no idea it would be this hard when Plattie announced that it was time to dress them. She whips out her blade and gets to work preparing them while Estrez and the girls wonder if she's a monster too. Later, Kitten works on another dish, and when he tastes it, he figures it's done. Just then, he hears the girls arrive and figures it's perfect timing. However, when he goes to welcome them, he sees the gloomy look on their faces and asks what's wrong. Plattie says they're down because nothing has gone their way all day. Estrez admits that even though she's feared amongst humans and mermaids, coming to this island has humbled the hell out of her as residents are OP and the equipment is godly. When she admits her powerlessness, Kitten tells her it's not about her strength or influence, but the people who swear to stay by her side, which means she has a power called charm. He tells them to believe in themselves more, and one day, they'll discover new possibilities. He suggests they eat dinner outside since the weather is nice and serves up a platter of food. Estrez and the girls wonder what time of food this is, so Kitten calls it ginger grilled square boar and soup. The girls have no idea what he's babbling about, but just one taste moves Estrez to tears from how delicious it is. As usual, Plattie and Vale go crazy over the food too, and they prepare to do their best the next day. Some days later, Estrez tells the girls she can't find Plattie and Kitten, so Belina tells her they're in the sea, running some errands. Estrez says she's done harvesting the vegetables, so Belina suggests they pull some weeds and clean the house later. Suddenly, Estrez notices Vale telling them that if they don't work, they'll die, so Estrez asks what's stopping Vale, which annoys her. Vale claims she's watching the house, but Belina and Belina agree they can't wait for Kitten to come back. Meanwhile, Kitten watches Plattie relax in her mermaid form. Kitten asks if she feels more at ease spending time in the ocean, so Plattie says it feels the same because her land-dwelling medicine is the best quality, and she enjoys her life. Kitten is impressed by how considerate she is, so he asks what she wants to talk about. At this, Plattie informs him that there are sea monsters coming from there. She explains that just like cave and mountain dungeons, there are also ocean dungeons where monsters emerge. Kitten points out that the starfish monsters and fertilizers are all monsters too, so Plattie confirms this and reveals that there's a bad monster dwelling beneath this ocean. Apparently, it's part of the top 5 she doesn't want to meet, but she's confident she'll be fine if Kitten goes with her. She then pulls out some water-breathing medicine to make it possible and tells him to put it in his mouth and chew while he's in the water. Plattie warns that it's still incomplete and tells him to be careful not to swallow. Kitten insists he's got the gist of it, but Plattie points out that he already swallowed it. After chewing another one, they jump into the water, and Kitten is amazed that he can actually breathe underwater. When he spots how beautiful Plattie looks in her mermaid form, he realizes he forgot because she's always on the surface. As he swims after her, he's grateful that this beautiful princess is actually his wife. Just then, Kitten's trouser tightens, causing Plattie to ask what's wrong. She tries to make sure he's chewing the seaweed right, but Kitten assures her he's fine. Suddenly, Plattie senses something, turns around, and notices the salt mixing with the minerals along with a dense thirst for blood. Kitten wonders what in the hell is coming this time, and the monster finally reveals itself. A monster eel. As the monster charges for them, Plattie says she'll stop its movements and leave the rest to Kitten. She then throws some of her potions at it, which destabilizes the monster and causes it to cry out in pain. Kitten is amazed that it can still burn underwater, but Plattie gives him the signal to move. Kitten swims forward and swings his sword randomly, which ends up cutting right through the eel. Plattie praises him excitedly and says it's time to go home since their work is done. However, Kitten notices something and tries to signal, so Plattie figures he wants to wait a bit. This time, he swims ahead while Plattie follows him, wondering what's going on. Plattie says it's a seaweed that can't be used for medicine, and is pretty much a nuisance for growing so fast. Kitten, on the other hand, has an idea to use the seaweed as food. Later, Kitten tries the combination of eel and seaweed, wondering what it'll turn out like. After seasoning it, he hands it to Plattie, who calls it delicious on the spot. As Plattie praises the food intricately, Kitten says he's glad such a small addition could make a big impact. However, since removing the eel's slime is too much work, they plan to leave it behind. Plattie says everyone will be surprised to discover this recipe and informs him her respect for him just went up. Kitten tells her that this isn't his power alone, as someone keeps supporting him. Even though they started their lives alone, their residents have increased ever since, and everywhere is lively now. As much as he realizes he needs support, he also realizes that he needs to make time for just the two of them because they're newlyweds. He suggests they come again to swim, so Plattie excitedly agrees. Meanwhile, far away in the demon castle, the demons inform the demon king they need to elect a successor for Estress now that she's been evicted. When the demon king asks who permitted her dismissal, Ravian tries to explain that she committed a huge blunder. However, the demon king insists that it was Ravian's plan to make Estress fail all along. He pulls out his sword and holds it to Ravian, calling him dishonest, so Ravian begs for forgiveness from the demon lord, Zedin. Zedin tells Ravian to get his act together by the time he returns, while another servant hands him the coordinates of the transmitted magic. Zedin tells the great Saint Kitten just to wait, insisting that even demons are moved by passion too. Meanwhile, in the human kingdom, one of the summons named Momoko remembers how she was just a normal school student till she was transported to another world. Now, she uses her goddess scythe to defeat monsters and increase her power. It wasn't easy for the summons to adapt to a life without modern convenience, and as a result, some of the people from other worlds didn't last long. There were 10 of them when they first arrived, but she has no idea how many are left. She remembers the kid who was deemed to have no skill and figures that he's probably dead because of how harsh this world is. However, unlike him, Momoko is favored by the king for having a skill directly gifted from the gods, so he gives her whatever she wants. Now, Momoko plans to fight and keep fighting with this skill until her skill is the strongest in the world. However, the Demon King's army seems to be made up of endless numbers of troops. For every one they defeat, 2 seem to take its place, with no end in sight. Despite this, Momoko was determined to protect this world. One day on the battlefield, they spotted a dragon carrying someone in its claws. The humans recognized it as one of the 2 greatest calamities, which could have meant their deaths. Even the demons agreed that the dragon was a monster to them, so they all wondered why the monster had arrived on the battlefield. Momoko instantly realized that her skill wouldn't come close to scratching the dragon's scales. The humans ordered an immediate retreat before the dragon could destroy them with a single breath, but just the dragon's landing carried enough force to throw them aside. The dragon told the insignificant worms that it was there with a message, shocking everyone that the calamity could speak. The dragon introduced itself as Vale, daughter of the Gracer Dragon, and said she was only there on an errand for her master to deliver the nuisance in her hands. Vale let go of a stress, and while she plummeted, the demons recognized her as one of the 4 commanders and rushed to catch her. Vale explained that she would have ended her and been done with it, so they should be thankful that her master had not allowed it. She then warned that whether they were human or demon, if anyone bothered her master in any way, she would obliterate their cities with a single breath. To show she was not bluffing, Vale shot her powerful breath of death into the sky, parting the clouds several meters above. Just the shockwave alone was enough to push the humans and demons back as they cowered at such enormous power. Lastly, Vale revealed that her master was the holy Saint Kidden, and as she flew away, she reminded them that becoming his enemy meant becoming hers as well, and she would not have mercy a second time. Everyone watched in stunned daze as the only thing they chorused was the name Saint Kidden, wondering how someone could be even higher than that dragon. They all wondered if such a person existed, but no one had ever heard such a name before. Back in the present, Kidden's estate is in a state of peace and calm as Kidden himself enjoys some lunch outside. After he savors how delicious the food tastes, he looks out on the field and plans to work on it the next day, just like he did the day before. However, he suddenly hears a voice asking if he's the great Saint Kidden by any chance. Kidden confirms this and asks who he is, so the man introduces himself as Demon Lord Zedden, causing Kidden to nervously say hello. Will the Demon Lord be converted by Kidden's meat too? And will Momoko finally get humbled when she discovers who has the most powerful skill? To find out, comment, "I want to taste Kidden's meat too." Leave a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video and subscribe to the channel for similar content. And as always, thanks for watching.